talk about cities, I tend to find with clients that there's a distinct mix of people who absolutely want to work in London. They don't want to work anywhere else. They've got their heart set on London. And actually quite a lot of students who really don't care. They think that London is too expensive. They want to work in a city which is close to their university. A lot of international students go to universities in the sort of Midlands or in the north of England, for example, Sheffield, Liverpool, Warwick, Coventry, Leeds, and so on. And they think, I'm really not that fussed about London. What I would say is that London is definitely more competitive. Quite a few companies do really struggle to fulfill their vacancies outside of London because we see so many people go to London. Particularly in the UK, we have a saying, London's where you go to work, not to find happiness. And maybe the same could be said for New Delhi, Beijing, Shanghai, Sydney, New York, Paris, Berlin, and so on and so forth. It's super busy, it's really expensive, and maybe it's not for everybody. And let's face it, there's a few things to bear in mind. First of all, if you have, say for example, PwC, who have moved their head office over to Birmingham, if you lived in Birmingham, I'd say you'd cut your living expenses by 33%, right? But a really enormous amount. You just wouldn't believe it, from your rent, your travel, your food, not so much. There's not too much differentiation between cities, but the rent is going to make a huge difference. Your rent is basically going to be your biggest cost. And second behind that being potentially food and travel, and maybe entertainment, depending upon your own personal disposition. So what I would say for this is the salary isn't going to be that much different. You may have a difference of, say, anywhere between £2,000 to £5,000. So what you've got to think to yourself is, do you really, really want to work in London, or could you just work outside of London and commute? Or work outside of London and commute to other offices and stuff like that? Because a lot of these offices are satellites. And the same is true as you go further north. Probably in Manchester, you're looking at half the cost. So, Liverpool, Newcastle, Sheffield. One thing I would say is I'm always very cautious about saying to international students about applying for jobs in Scotland unless it's for big banks or a big company, because I tend to find they won't pay the salary. By the time you're kind of getting up to Scotland, unless you're applying for, say, a Morgan Stanley, you'll find the salaries are getting fairly close to the wire, to the 20,800. And this, in fact, is not the same for all jobs. Some jobs actually require a higher minimum salary. There's something which is called the immigration rules, and I believe it's Part J, which lays out all the different types of jobs and all the minimum salaries that are required. It's not something to really worry about now. I will put a link of it in this post. But what I'd say to you is, if you're looking for less competition, then maybe just think about outside of London. For sure, I always say, think about Birmingham, think about Manchester, Liverpool. Dublin is a really good shout as well. There are a lot of companies who've pitched up in Dublin, like Facebook, Google, Dropbox, Deloitte, because where the big tech companies are, a lot of other companies pop up to kind of service them. So, if you have to work in London, I get it, but also I would sort of try and think, in terms of what's my ultimate goal. Is it working in London, or is it just getting a tier 2 job?